Bridget, it's so exciting to see you for our very first episode featuring guests. And we had the great opportunity to talk with Jen Reeves and Chris Kercher from Quinn Emanuel. And we got to explore all sorts of ways that they are using AI at the firm. They are very AI forward at Quinn. And we got to explore how leadership combined with handing the tools to everyone combined with really being experimental and optimistic have resulted in lots of interesting uses for AI.
Quinn really seems to have a culture that is allowing AI experimentation to flourish. And as a result, it seems like we're seeing a lot of happy and excited lawyers about the ways in which this technology is having an impact for their clients and for their teams. So, this is going to be a fun conversation. I can't wait.
This is really, really exciting after a year of just us trying to figure out what's happening out there in the wild, wild world of AI. We actually have two people who are working really hard every single day to integrate AI into the practice of law. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by two leaders in legal, Chris Kercher and Jen Reeves, both of whom are at the leading firm Quinn Emanuel, a powerhouse in litigation. Chris is a partner at Quinn, and Jen is lead innovation counsel. And as part of her role, she is leading Gen AI initiatives at the firm. Welcome, Jen and Chris. Thank you so much for being our first official guests at AI in the Future of Law.
Thrilled to be here, Jen and Bridget. Thanks for having us. Thrilled to be the first guest. Honored.
So, one of the segments that we like to lead with, because AI and generative AI in particular is a general purpose technology without an instruction manual. So it's kind of interesting to learn about it and try to figure out what it does. Is our AI aha segment, where we share something we've been using generative AI to do in our personal or professional lives that we find particularly interesting. And our audience has heard Bridget and I use it in all sorts of really weird and fascinating ways. And we thought it would be interesting for them to hear from each of you how you've been using AI in your lives. So, Jen, maybe you'll kick us off with our first guest, AI Aha. How have you been using AI in your life?
Happy to. I was in the process of moving from New York to Houston, a couple weeks ago, and my fiancé and I decided it would be fun to drive, and we had movers come take our stuff, so we were just taking a little road trip, and I had used Manus initially to plan, like, what cities should we stop in? We don't wanna drive too much each day. Where should we stay? Lots of options, so it gave me this really great itinerary, and so that was a good starting point. But actually, what happened was real time updates I made using ChatGPT. So we were on the road, we'd get too tired, and I could say, like, what's not going to get us too far off track, but it's also a nice place to stay. And part of that is like giving it my definition of like a budget and casual, but nice. And it was just great. It was fantastic about knowing like what is kind of on our route still, not too far off the freeways, and but still like a nice restful place to stay. And we did that for the whole trip down. It was awesome, especially like with restaurants as well. Once the memory function was in place where it knew kind of what I liked, it made it really easy to be like, what should we eat tonight? Where should we stay? It was just fantastic. Yeah, it was great.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm glad you're all settled in Houston, and I'm glad that AI was helpful in the journey. Um, Chris, how have you been using AI in your life recently?
So obviously, Jen and I did not coordinate this. Mine is also moving. But slightly different. So we're moving from Westchester, New York to Connecticut, just a few minutes away. But there's a lot that goes on in moving a family of six. And so my wife and I, who are both busy professionals, created a ChatGPT project, loaded in everything from the house inspection report to our vendor list to every email we get from someone involved in this process. And it's made an unbelievable punch list of things we never would have thought of that are, necessary for moving a house, leaving one house, moving into another, closing a new house, switching states and different, requirements that we have to pay attention to. So it's been really cool for that. And I'll give you a bonus one if you want two ahas because I had another one ready. And this is a little bit more random, but the art capabilities on ChatGPT are or some of the other image generating ones are really cool. And so I took photos of different photos, one of me and each of my children and one of me and my wife. And for each of them, I turned it into something else, some sort of cartoon or some version of the photo. And then I had them put on sweatshirts and I gave a matching one to me and each of my daughters or me and my wife. So we have these matching sweatshirts that have photos of the person in some sort of like cartoon style. It was really random, but it was actually a ton of fun. And I love wearing them. So
Oh, I love
yeah.
that. Great AI ahas, big life moments.
Yeah,
Very cool.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for inspiring us with your new ideas. And of course, we are here to talk all about AI in law. And so I'm going to turn it to Bridget to get our conversation going.
It's really exciting to get to talk to you too. It feels like you were some of the first lawyers, at least in global law firms like Quinn's, that we were in touch with, who are really like all in, sleeves rolled up, figuring out how this technology might make a difference for the people you serve. At least that's what we heard from you very early on, and it's been really fun to stay in touch with you. But so for our listeners, just starting from the beginning, Chris, tell us a little bit about what Quinn's approach to using AI has been. What are the goals, and how have you seen it have an impact already? And to the extent you're comfortable talking about your roadmap, we would love to hear as much as you can share.
Absolutely, Bridget, and thank you, and thanks again for having us. It's been a very unconventional journey. It's like much we do at Quinn. We don't have, we're known for not having a lot of structure or bureaucracy. Sometimes that can be difficult because it's not always clear what to do, but it also means you can just do things. And so about a year ago, I mean, I started using ChatGPT at the beginning. It sort of was clear to me that this would be a useful thing to know how to do, played around with it a bunch. And then when Claude 3, I think, came out about a year ago, I had my ultimate aha moment like, oh my God, this Claude Opus can really write. I mean, it writes well and can edit well. And so I reached out to our head of IT, John Stambellos, and said, basically, I don't want to have to do this thing where I'm anonymizing client names or I'm, dealing and worrying about client confidentiality. And so it really restricts me in what I can upload. Can we get an enterprise version? Even on a pilot. And he agreed. He was eager to find AI tools. He was thrilled, I think, to find out that I had found value in one. And so I started to think about what can this do for us actually? And I had a couple notions I think we're still working through, so the roadmap is a bit fuzzy. But one was just put it in the hands of the people. Like, let's get people who are smart and talented and creative to just start playing with it like I am, and to share information and to share pitfalls and techniques and tools, and to build some enthusiasm. I think I had observed that at other places there was a much more conservative approach where there was a lot of concern about client confidentiality, a ton of concern about hallucinations. And I said, hold on, let's solve for those, right? Let's make sure that everything that leaves the firm with our names on it, someone has, site checked and rigorously reviewed as they're supposed to do anyway. And then let's get an enterprise model so that we don't have to worry about client data leakage. And then let's get it to people and let's encourage them. Don't think of it as cheating. Think of it as like a new tool. And why wouldn't you use it? And so that's been incredibly successful. I think we've got hundreds of people now on it at the firm. We started sort of from the bottom up. We started with, young associates, staff members, people who I felt like would be, tech early adopters who would get into it, who would use it responsibly, and who would share their learnings. We created something called the QE Skunk Works program, which was a nod to Lockheed Martin's innovative R&D efforts. And so we had our own Slack group, we had our own Zoom. There was no credit to anyone. There was no billable hours. It was just if you want to, learn about this and mess around with it and share your findings, join. And a ton of enthusiasm. It was really, really rewarding. Um, and so that's been a huge part of it is just establishing a culture where people are thinking about AI, using AI, sharing with each other's how they use it, and trying to build that way, which I think has been great. The other 2, um, aspects of it that sort of came to mind, one were, okay, we've gotta one is, we've gotta find out what tools are out there. There's a ton of venture capital money chasing this market. It seems like, all the brilliant machine learning engineers at the FANG companies were able to go out and get, VC investments, and the VC said, "Well, try law. Lawyers need AI." And so you saw a lot of products that don't really serve our needs. But there could be a lot of temptation for firms to just grab something. So I wanted to make sure that we were smart about what we bought, and that we, had a lot of bandwidth to look at everything. And then the third piece is really thinking through, well, what can this do for our data, right? Because Quinn Emanuel has a lot of information about itself and about what we do, but it's hard to get at historically, and it's hard to organize and classify and use. And so starting to explore, well, are there things that we can do to better understand our business or our practice, using AI tools to unearth some of that? And so that was sort of the roadmap, and what we needed most of all was someone to run that every day, because I, am very much a practicing litigator. I, won Litigator of the Week, in March for a big, trial court victory in front of another, Judge McCormick in Delaware. That I was able to use AI in that case, and that was really exciting, but I can't do all of those things all the time. And so when I reached out to John last year and suggested that we not only get Claude, I also asked him if we could hire someone to run this operation full time and do the training and culture building and, evaluation of tools. And how we landed Jen Reeves, I will never understand, but that has been the number one most valuable thing we've done. Jen has been a huge value add, and to have someone who's committed every day to building enthusiasm, to teaching people how to use it, to getting people on board, and who genuinely like loves doing it, like really, I think gets the same kick out of it that I do, is just such a treat. So that's been the primary pillar, as it turns out.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but you literally followed like the roadmap that Ethan Mollick has laid out in a lot of his scholarship of leadership, crowd, and lab. You have the crowd, you have everybody in, which I think is exactly the right way to do it. Only you know the best ways it's going to impact your workflow. You have the Skunk Works lab team that's, really, driving, and you have the top leadership at the firm not only supporting it, but investing in it. And so I don't know if you knew you were doing all of that. Jen, were you pulling this all together to follow a roadmap that was proven to work, or you guys are just brilliant and should have written the scholarship that Ethan's getting credit for?
We're avid Ethan Mollick readers, as well, and when you kind of, eat, sleep, breathe, like the Innovator's Handbook and those different books like that, it kind of just seeps into your brain, so when you think about, "Oh, how should we get this new technology, adopted by people?" Like, well, what was the aha moment for me? What turned that on? And it just kind of and Chris takes all the credit here as well for kind of setting this up. I got to inherit the Skunk Works group, which was amazing. And yeah, it was a cross-sectional group of the firm, so we weren't limited to just people that were too busy because they're working on, high profile things, or just people that weren't really interested, so they were kind of forced to do this because they're in this leadership position. We really got a good group going, and then I was able to build off of that. But yeah, I don't know, Chris. I know that you're an Ethan Mollick
Yeah,
reader.
I would just say it's funny, it's sort of like how learning works, right? Like I didn't listen or read anything by Ethan's that I wrote down and said this is what we'll do, but I am not surprised that we followed his roadmap, because I've been reading him since the beginning, and sometimes I'll go back and read something he wrote and realize, oh, that was probably pretty influential for me. And I didn't, it just sort of goes in the brain, and then later on I find it's really Ethan. I think the other guy is this guy, Andre Karpathy, who used to be at Tesla and OpenAI, who posts a lot. And when, he says these things that I sometimes wonder, is that really obvious, or is that like it? And he seems to have it a lot. And so I think the two of them have been going in my brain in various ways and coming out probably months later. The approach makes a ton of sense, and I think it's worked well versus, as Jen said, more of a top-down approach where a certain AI tool is mandated and it's coming from a direction where people who are practicing don't really understand, what the goal is or what they're supposed to be doing. So I would encourage other organizations to read Ethan and to think about his lessons because we've had a lot of success with that roadmap.
I wanted to home in too on another thing that you said there, Chris. It's so funny you said that, Bridget, because as he was talking, I wrote down lab leader, crowd, eat the mug. So definitely following that roadmap. But the other thing that you said, Chris, Bridget and I have literally said on this podcast before, we listen to another podcast called the Dwarkesh podcast, which tends to be really technical. And we were listening to two technologists a few weeks ago. Are they from Claude? I can't remember. And from Anthropic, and kept saying they were encountering roadblocks and they kept saying, "So we solved for it and we're going to solve for this." And you said that, Chris. You said, "I went to John and I said, we need to solve for this." And when we go out on the road or we're working with firms or Bridget's working with her team, it's such a mindset difference when you encounter lawyers where it's like, well, there's hallucinations and we can't do this versus people who are like, there's hallucinations and we need to solve for this so that we can figure out how to do this. And it seems like such a simple thing, but it's also everything about being successful in this arena. So I thought it was interesting that you just literally said those words.
Oh, yeah, and it is such an unlock once you get past that and you can realize, "Oh, wait a minute, we have to solve for that anyway." Someone should be carefully site checking everything, and not just for the, blue book abbreviation for amalgamated, but actually the substance of it really matters. I mean, that's what we're vouching for, and so the junior attorneys, suddenly become in this position where they're really the masters of reality. They're the ones who are checking to make sure that what we say is aligning with some demonstrable reality, the case law, the facts, um, what have you. And so that's been huge. And I just think culturally, having that kind of mentality where we're not freaking out about it, we're sensibly addressing it and then encouraging and getting excited about when I can tell sometimes when someone uses Claude, and I think that's another thing that you learn is what are the giveaways of AI use, and it's not about transforming legal industry. It's about a new culture. That sort of framing of sentences you start to see a lot. But when I see work and it's well done, and I know someone used Claude, I applaud them. I said, "This is great. We, cranked out a summary for a client on a Friday afternoon before a holiday weekend." That most firms probably wouldn't get to until next week, but we did it. It's beautiful. It's informative. It's correct and it was both easier and higher quality. And so I just find that the teams that I'm on and leading are adopting it really fast, and they're able to move faster and be more creative. And so it's really the most exciting time I've ever had to practice. So it's great.
A question for you, Jen, about the learning process. Another thing I think, Bridget, that we see when we talk to different groups is they want so much to have like a very clear way to scaffold on to the work that everybody is doing, this like map that every single person should follow. And that is going to be the key to success in the organization. Do you think that's the right approach to helping an organization learn how to use AI, or is there a better way to teach people at an individual level?
It's a great question and something Chris and I thought a lot about, and I'm pretty proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And I think it speaks volumes after the fact when you can see those engagement and adoption numbers continue after just, okay, they logged in, but are they continuing to go back? And yeah, it's not just these workflows that people, again, kind of far removed from practice are saying, oh, you can use it for this. Look, here's this utility, but actually letting the lawyer kind of guide how it can be implemented in their workflow. Like I always tell them, you're the subject matter expert on your work. I'm here to help you and guide you with how to use the tool, but you have to tell me what you're working on and I can kind of show you how Chris or I might apply it in that situation. So we'll do like an overview and show them, okay, here's quite literally how to upload a document. Here's how it works. But then, okay, that piqued your interest. Come back to us when you're actually working on something. And it could be anything. It will fit in anywhere. That's what we tell them too. You don't just have to wait till you have some specific use case that fits some very specific formula. It can help everywhere. And I think that really helps.
Yeah, I would add, it's so interesting to me as not a technologist that it's really hard to teach this and to show people, and I can show them output, but unless the question and the output mean anything to them, it just looks like, okay, that's impressive. Yeah, it can write full paragraphs, and that's crazy, but I don't know if that's right or wrong or obvious or insightful. But and that's why Jen's insight, let's have people bring us their actual problems so we can work through it and they can see, "Oh, wait a minute, that is a great idea," or "Wow, that's an interesting thought," or maybe, "Oh, this is all very obvious." What am I gonna do with this?" Was a real insight for us.
It sounds to me like Quinn has a, a background culture that made it easier for you all to build this experiment that's like taking off and and bringing real value to certainly to your clients, and it sounds like to your lawyers, because at least listening to you two, it seems like it's probably more fun when you have a super brilliant partner brainstorming with you throughout a hard project. I find that too, obviously. But that background culture interests me. We Jen and I do a lot of presentations to a lot of legal teams, in-house, out-house, small, medium, large. And I do think every organization, of course, has its like starting DNA, right? It's like starting culture. And Quinn's just might have been really well positioned to take advantage of this, or, you know, Chris, you're just you got it done. But it sounds like it's probably a combination of all of the above. Does that mean that when you are doing these what are like consultations almost, like you guys will be like, bring me the actual problem, let's work on it together, which I also think is the right way, like sit with somebody and like brainstorm together with this extra smart person on your screen, as Andre Karpathy calls it, like a secret human spirit in the computer. That's how he's talking about it. I love it. Um, what are the reactions though? Like, have you, has every lawyer been, blown away and logged in now all day, all night, or is it varied? I mean, we see really varied reactions across the profession, and I'm wondering if you also see that at the firm, or not so much.
Yeah, it's a great question and one that I haven't really talked about before, but I've certainly thought a lot about. If you go back a year ago, the world and certainly the legal community's view of AI, I think, was very different than it is even now. I didn't know what would be, accepted. I knew that I knew this was important. I knew this was something worth spending my time and focus on. And I had hoped that I could, do that at Quinn in a thriving way. I knew that we had the culture to do a thing like that, and I didn't wanna hamstring it with a lot of rules and overhead and committees. I just wanted to go do and get in people's hands, and so I had a lot of sleepless nights that someone would submit, a filing to, a court, and there would be a hallucination, and then one of my partners would call me and say, "Why the hell are we using AI? I didn't know about this." There wasn't any sort of top-down plan for it. And so that's why I was and Jen can tell you, we were doing and still are one-on-one, onboardings with people to drill into them the importance that, this may look like the right quote. That's on purpose, right? The thing is predicting what quote should be in the opinion, whether it is or not. And so it's really insidious. I've been burned a bunch of times in just internal drafts that I thought I had something, and you gotta really check. But once we get over that hump, I felt okay, and so I didn't wanna, like, broadly broadcast it to everyone because there's a lot of people, not just at Quinn, I think actually probably just in the world, that have strong feelings about AI, and I wanted to meet people where they were. I don't wanna push it on people. I don't wanna, force feed AI to anyone. If someone wants to use AI, Jen and I are there to help walk you through it. We'll show you how we would solve problems, how to get on. I sent around a thing to my partners, just sort of with some thoughts, probably heavily influenced by Malak and Karpathy, and probably you too, and just sort of the state of play. We have a listserv going, and so there's an education component. But early on, it was really uncertain what was going to happen. It was let's go see, let's take a lot of precautions so that if something goes wrong, we can solve it and fix it for the future. But now we've gotten a ton of traction. We've got all these people onboarded. I think meanwhile, the technology is advancing, so the output is even more impressive. We just started a ChatGPT pilot to go along with our Claude pilot, and so we've got a lot of people trying it at all levels of the firm. And I think for the most part, it's been a really enthusiastic response. Some people have voiced some concern, but I think at this point in time, at least my impression is they're not. I don't see a lot of people sort of evangelizing against it. I think people are hesitant. I think the most common sort of mental state that I'm observing now is someone thinking or saying, I know I got to try this. I know I have to get into it. I just don't have the time. And so one of the things that Jen and I are working on is how to make it a little bit more approachable, even with just a little tiny, aha moment for someone to get them to start using it on their own. I think you guys have said this. I use it for almost anything. The dictation feature alone is fantastic, and just to be able to brain dump whatever's on my head, create a to do list, ask it to help me plan some complex thing, and track it is revolutionary. And so I'm excited. It's great for us to share those aha moments with people, and I love that you guys do that because that's what we're going for. We want to sit down with someone and not just show them how to summarize a deposition, but get them to an aha moment where they realize I don't need these two. I can just go off and do it on my own and get what I will out.
I'll say, yeah, it's been amazing. Like, when I first started, there was a lot of, okay, guys, we have this tool. We started with a small number of licenses and trying to drum up interest. I don't have to advertise Claude or AI at the firm anymore. I'm getting requests like at least 5 a day, if not more, depending on, if we've sent out a newsletter or if Chris has sent out an email. And people are just coming out saying, "Oh, I saw someone do this really cool thing with it. I've just been hearing," like, I have a folder on my email of these quotes of people saying, "Oh, this has been great. I've heard really good things. I need to get on it." And so, yeah, I do think that the culture definitely allows for that because, as Chris said, we didn't hamstring it with all of these, you have to anonymize, you have to redact. That's just not going to help with engagement and adoption. People are just going to say, well, it's just easier for me to do. I don't have time to learn something new and figure out how to redact things. So, really, just kind of saying, like, okay, this is a safe environment, experiment. Some of it might not work, but you're also learning something from that as well.
So we have received frequent inquiries from firms that are much smaller than Quinn. In some case, solo practices or firms with 3, 6 lawyers. They don't have a lot of resources and they don't have teams with phenomenal talent like Jen and sort of guiding them along and telling them what's safe and what's not safe. But they're really, really eager to figure out how to run their practices better and leverage the power of these tools. And they have asked us to ask our guests how they should approach using a publicly available model like a Claude or a Chat GPT to get started. So, Chris, maybe I'll start with you and ask you what advice you would give to an experienced partner who's maybe in a solo shop and wants to start using this in practice, not just on the business side of the firm.
Yeah, wow, what a great question, and honestly, I think it's a great time to be. I mean, this is against interest, I think, but a great time to be a soul because you can leverage yourself, your cognitive abilities, your attention, your mental stamina so much more. And so, it's interesting. I think you sort of want to work through a similar process to what we did. Start with the things that you have to solve. So, client data, confidentiality, privilege, all that is paramount. And so whether it's an enterprise license or there's, a model that has, some sole license where they're not training on the data, you can have a reasonable expectation of privacy and control privilege and work product that way, and not have to worry about what information am I uploading that some adversary is going to say, waives a privilege or something like that. So you solve that. And then obviously, I think the scary part is not having someone else to look at your work and check it before it goes in. And that may be something to solve for. You don't need necessarily an associate. You just need a good proofreader. Maybe you do because I guess you have to look at the site checks, but hire a young lawyer to help with that. But if you're in a small firm, I think you can go. And, there's a lot of great resources online, but I think most of it ends up being just self-taught. And the fun thing is, and the real unlock for me was just asking the model, "Hey, Claude, here's what I am trying to do. How can you help me? What part of this or all of it can you take on? Can you help me plan it? Can you help me come up with a game plan, a punch list?" Just like we did for our move. It just helps organize you, get you squared away, and then you can start chipping it off. I think the other thing that I would just, point out to people is context is key. And this is another Karpathy point that I think Jen can back me that before he came up with context engineering, a fairly obvious label to go along with prompt engineering. I was saying something like that within the last few weeks. It must be mimetic. But the importance of getting the relevant context into the context window about your case, about your matter, whatever you're dealing with, it just so incrementally increases the quality of the output. I almost can't describe it. It can be subtle, it can be obvious, but you really get just such better output when it knows more about you, your problem, what you're dealing with in the context. And so, making the investment to spend a little extra time when you have something that you're going to keep going back to. So for us, it's setting up the Claude project for each case, keeping it maintained and making sure that we get the relevant context in there. So it might be like the complaint and the answer. It might be, if you get more sophisticated, having Claude condense the complaint, the answer, the depositions, your chronology, whatever you have, put it in there and then just start working with it. Those are just two, that's a huge step that you can take early on that I think you'll find you get much better responses from.
I would add to that, yeah, there's so much you can do with just the frontier models. Like that's basically all we're using right now, and you're able to do so much with those. You don't have to worry like, "Oh, we don't have the expensive whatever legal specific tool." You don't have to worry about that. Like Chris said, it's the context that's really so critical here, and that's always what I tell people too. If you're not even sure how to get started, just throw the key documents from whatever you're working on in a Claude project and start interacting with it. And you and Claude are then operating in the same universe of, okay, these are the parties, these are the key legal issues, and then just go from there. And it's really helpful. You don't have to worry about perfectly crafted prompts. I try not even to use the words prompt engineering other than to say, don't worry about that. Just focus on communication and then uploading relevant information, relevant context really goes a long way.
It's just such a different way for humans to work with software that and it people get used to it, but they don't understand it at first. I've had 2 experiences recently with, kind of onboarding people in my life, to this world, people I love dearly. My brother was one of them. He's a screenwriter. So completely different, business, working on a bunch of projects at once and likes to talk to a partner when he's writing. And I was like, "Ooh, do I have a partner for you?" And I was, teaching him how to do it. Like we got him his own subscription, and he kept turning to me saying, like, "Well, what if I want to X?" And I was like, "Ask your friend. Go right ahead and ask ChatGPT." And he couldn't believe it. He was like, "Oh, yeah, the ChatGPT is better than you." I'm like, "I know, because if you asked me, I would just go in and ask ChatGPT, so you may as well just go directly to the source." And I feel like that's actually something that once lawyers get used to it, it's a superpower, right? Because it's like you actually have this, like, never tired, never hungry, always available, like, thought partner, which is quite useful when you're doing the kinds of, like, high high level work that you're doing all day long, right? It's like like you said, Chris, it's like an extension of yourself, always available and always polite. It's really nice.
It's great, and, it's interesting that you start to your point, we're not used to working in this way, but it's also not foreign once you it's not like coding. I took CS 100 at Cornell. The only science I took it senior year, pass fail. I passed by the skin of my teeth and remember nothing. And I look at code, I don't understand it. One of the interesting things, though, just as an aside that I've noticed is coders, people who program software, seem to be ahead of everyone else in how they're using these tools. There's Cursor and Claude Code, and I see these things referred to online, and I have an intuition that maybe those techniques are not just for coders. And so I didn't know what to do. So we actually, my 15-year-old daughter is our intern this summer, our AI intern, and one of the first things I had her do was, "You take coding in school. Help me understand what Claude Code and Cursor are doing, and how maybe we can use those to do the work we do, because there's a lot of similarities in terms of use of context and grounding and the creation of new language from existing language." So that's been very interesting. But other things that have been really valuable. So using it as kind of like a bookmark for the brain. So I may have these half-baked ideas in order I probably, if you ask my friends, I've had more half-baked ideas than anyone, and some of them eventually get fully baked. Jen Reeves is a great example of one that was fully baked, where I had this half-baked idea that we need someone to do this, and what would that look like? And then eventually it became a job description that I could give and we could hire. But it's really anything where I can just dictate as I walk around, as I pace or I go for a walk or commuting, here are my ideas. Let's just dump it. If I can't go anywhere further, if the AI maybe can make some connections, but if it can't, I leave it. But then if I have another thought and it's related, I can go back. And I don't know, unless you're like a really good journaler or something, I don't know what the analogy would be, but it's so obvious and it works great. And I also think that in terms of the programming of it, again, I got to give Karpathy a citation here, but English is the hottest new programming language. It's true. And who are some of the best communicators in the English language? Lawyers, at least, my partners, my colleagues. I look to my great appellate writers and think you guys are going to be amazing at this, because if you can communicate really clearly to a human, a judge, or whoever, I have a feeling you're going to be able to communicate well with the AI. And that's just, that is night and day when you can communicate clearly.
Yeah, and, I think to the earlier point about, things that we're doing now and working alongside with AI that we can't believe. I think, Chris, you said, like, moving across this line where we're using it for everything, and we're in this weird liminal period where you find yourself in pockets where people are not AI users. I was on a panel planning call a few weeks ago, and there were 4 of us, and I'm clearly the only one who's crossed this Rubicon. And the first 15 minutes of the call were like, "What do we think an audience would want to know about this topic?" And everybody stared into space, and then people were like, "Would they wanna talk about," and I just Bridget, like, I'm asking 4 different LLMs, and I just couldn't believe that people were just sitting there trying to use our tiny brains to come up with, like, ideas and bounce them out there. And what a useless way to engage your brain. Like, it's not something that any of us will miss, like panel planning calls. But I wonder what you think in 5, 10 years we'll look back on today that you're doing in practice today, that you'll say, "I can't believe we used to do X with our time, and thank goodness we no longer have to do X with our time because AI does it now, or we supervise AI to do it now."
So I had fairly recently a new thought about, you think about where AI is going to go and how we're using it and what may be surprising. And one maybe obvious notion that I've had, but it's starting to think about where it goes. And it keys off the point you just made, which is, think about ordinarily without AI, people would have just made stuff up, right? Oh, I guess people want X, so we'll give them X. Um, I think we may reach a world where, forget like agents and automating and people, life may look relatively the same, except it'll be better because communication should be so much easier now. Like when our clients, business people are sitting there and they have a business issue, you see so many business people, regular business people who, if anything is within 100 miles of legal, they just don't want anything to do with it, right? I don't know, legal's got it. It deals with the contract. I don't But if you open up a little bit the ability of people to just to get a little bit more clear in their thoughts and be able to organize it better, suddenly, they may come up with entirely new legal problems that no one ever would have raised. Or my wife's a pediatrician, and I think a lot of people sort of, struggle to just forget diagnostic work, but the ability to communicate with, a specialist who maybe is intimidating or knows more than you. And you realize that, like, it's all actually not that complicated. Obviously the sciences and the real insides of it, but just sort of that surface level ability to communicate is totally different. And so I think in every walk of life where people may have a block because they can't fully articulate and communicate their intent, they can now use this new tool to clarify and amplify and really get out what they want so that our ideas are better, they're correct, more correct, right? There's more reliability of asking the AI what would people want versus us just making it up. We can still evaluate the list of options and have to, but at least we're starting with, like, a broader set of ideas that maybe is a little bit more all-encompassing. So, I don't know, I feel like everything is going to be better in some way because we're breaking down communication barriers and imagination barriers and everything else. But we'll see how that works in practice. Jen, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say also to similar to that point, we've been this was another great Chris idea. There's those pardon the interruption emails or just those RFI emails that go out to the firm where somebody's like, "Do you know this person?" or "Does anybody have anything on this or any research on this?" That's a great opportunity where Chris or I will just run a deep research prompt real quick. Again, using kind of O3 to come up with a deep research prompt and pull out things that might be helpful, throw that into actual deep research, and it comes up with this amazing dossier. Forward that to a partner, and that's been huge for getting people to go, "Oh, I didn't know it could do that. That's super helpful. That helped prepare me. I had intelligent things to say to this GC that I didn't necessarily think of on my own." So again, like you're the partner doing the call, but it helps you prepare so much faster. We love deep research. You can't tell. It's been a great tool. But yeah, why wouldn't you just prepare that right before instead of having to Google or read a bunch of articles or asking someone else to do that for you? It just makes it so easy.
Well, we like to lead with optimism, but if optimism doesn't work, I think other lawyers should be fearful that there are other firms out there figuring out how to use these tools well. Right. And these are great examples of things that seem really small, but can accelerate and give you an advantage and give your clients an advantage. Um, and we're sort of sadly running out of time for our conversation. But before we go, a lot of this era is about learning on the fly and learning really quickly, which I think Bridget and I think is a lot of fun, actually. What is one resource that you've been using to keep you up to speed on AI? And Jen, maybe we'll start with you. And Chris, you can have the final word before we have to say goodbye.
Definitely, I know your podcast has been actually huge, especially on that road trip that I was just taking. But the Hard Fork podcast I really like because that makes it really easy to just kind of stay up to date. It's entertaining as well. But there's some great email newsletters that are also good. Like Brainiacs is a good one. There's some like more legal focused ones that have been helpful that just take a few seconds to read. But podcasting has been really helpful for me to just multitask while I pay attention.
For me, it's interesting. I worked on the acquisition of Twitter for Elon, who's a client, and I think X. It's so interesting that all of these brilliant AI minds are there, posting, like Andre Karpathy, right? The guy's resume is unbelievable. And he's just sharing his ideas in real time. And you've got other people who post, papers, right? Scientific papers on AI research. That the amazing thing is I just download them and give them to Claude and say, you know, explain this to me in plain English. How much math is this focused on versus maybe insights around how you prompt or how you use AI? And I think I've intuited a lot from just trying to get an understanding of where the research is and where things are going, seeing really creative uses on X, people like Ethan Malik and Karpathy and other thinkers that you can sort of get the benefit of all that and not not be a scientist, not be in that community. So I think that's a really great way to get smart.
Bridget, you use it for that too, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great this is a great way to end. I mean, I feel like this is kind of how we're all learning, and it's enough for now. I mean, the technology is changing so quickly that by following a few smart thought leaders who get to do it full time, the rest of us have full time jobs. So those are great shortcuts. I often will just take Ethan Malik's word for the summary of of a new academic study because I'm not I mean, I probably could read the academic study, but it would take me so long, it's not the best use of my time, and so following a few smart leaders, on social media, if you're not on X, they're all on LinkedIn as well, really does work, and it is amazing that podcasts are kind of the new, education delivery, device of this era, at least in my view. That's how I'm getting information as well, so you guys, this was so much fun to have you on and such a great example of kind of optimistic, positive, figuring out how this is going to make not only uh, better services for your clients, but really what's come through for me is a more fun practice, a more enjoyable practice, like a happier time at work because you have this new unlock that's allowing you to do what you do best more of the time. So it's been such a fun conversation. I'm really grateful for both of you for coming on and for Quinn for having such a great culture that allows this.
Thrilled to be here, honored to be your first guest, and this was a lot of fun. I was disappointed to hear that we're running out of time, but I could go on all day with you guys because it's really fun to as much as it's fun to teach people who haven't used it before, it's really fun to actually sit down with people who are using it and who kind of get it. Who've been on the other side and share a lot of the same experiences we've had. So thank you.
Come back next year because our hope is we're gonna have humanoid robots by then.
We'll see. We'll see.
Thank you both, and thanks to everybody out there for listening, and we hope you tune in next time for another edition of AI and the Future of Law.